Greetings and welcome. I'm Kelli Richards, CEO of the All Access Group and the host of All Access Radio. As a highly sought-after consultant, super connector, trusted advisor, celebrity wrangler, and thought leader, I connect the innovators in Silicon Valley with the storytellers in Hollywood. And as a trusted advisor, I transform the quality of people's lives. I'm also the author of the best-selling ebook, The Magic and Moxie of Apple, An Insider's View. Tonight's guest on the show is Lorenzo Lamas. Lorenzo is an American actor well known for playing Lance Cumson on the 80s soap opera Falcon Crest, for which he was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actor, and then was also the star on the 1990 TV series Renegade as Reno Raines, Hector Ramirez on the daytime soap opera The Bold and the Beautiful, and he's also starred in dozens of movies, starting with Grease and more recently Sharknado 3, Oh Hell No. And he served as a judge on ABC TV's Are You Hot and started in his own reality show, Leave It to Lamas, a series about his own real-life family. In 2014, Lorenzo published his autobiography, Renegade at Heart, and last year starred as a cast member on the reality TV show Celebrity Apprentice with Donald Trump. Welcome to the show, Lorenzo.
Thank you, Kelli. What a lovely intro.
Well, it's hard to distill everything you've done across your career in a few sentences, but I hope we did you justice.
No, you did a great job.
Yeah. We left out one important point, though, which is where I'd like to start, and that's that a few years ago you started at least part of a new life as a helicopter pilot. And I wonder if you could share with our listeners some more about what prompted that decision and, what you get out of flying as a departure.
Sure. Well, I started flying airplanes in 1997, and it was, I really never thought about flying airplanes. I was kind of more into motorcycles and racing cars and things like that in the 80s and the 90s. But what sparked the whole journey as an aviator for me began with a need. I needed to see my kids more. And my older kids, I have 6 kids. I have 2 sets. The older set, I've got 2 girls and a boy, and my younger kids, they're 3 daughters. The older set, their mother, when I divorced her, moved to Lake Havasu, Arizona.
Yep.
And I was very busy back in the late 80s, early 90s on television. In the 80s doing Falcon Crest, in the 90s doing Renegade. And it really prevented me from having a meaningful relationship with my kids that were gone, And after struggling with getting unaccompanied minor, buying tickets, getting, organized, having their mother drop them off at the airport on a Friday. They had to miss school. They'd come to me Friday night. I'd have a day and a half with them if I was lucky because I'd have to get them on a flight back to Arizona from San Diego on Sunday. It just was very, very difficult to coordinate. So the time that we were able to spend together suffered.
Yes.
Because of the distance. I felt horrible about it. So what I thought about doing during one hiatus of Renegade was to start taking flight lessons, because then I could rent a little airplane after work on Friday. I could fly to Arizona, pick up my kids Friday night, stick them in the airplane, come back to San Diego, spend the whole weekend with them.
Yeah.
And not have to worry about getting them to the airport at noon on Sunday. I could leave 6, 7, even 8 o'clock at night on Sunday and still have them home in their mother's house by like 9:30. So
that's amazing. I don't know too many people who would choose to go to those extremes. So that really speaks to your commitment in that context all by itself.
Well, it allowed me to spend more time with the kids, and instead of sitting in a commercial airliner talking to a flight attendant, they were in a little airplane talking to their dad.
No, so
that the quality time was multiplied times 100. And I did that I tried to do it at least once, if not twice a month. And during the summer, they would come out and spend a couple of weeks with me. So it helped a lot. But the reason why I started flying was not, and it wasn't a selfish reason. I didn't have a yearning to go fly in a machine. I just did it out of practical purposes so I could see my kids more, and it just began a whole journey for me up the aviation ladder.
And then, so now you still fly commercial airlines, charters and such, but you also fly helicopters. I know that because I flew in your helicopter with you.
Yeah, what happened was I continued to fly larger airplanes from 1997 to when I started, all the way through my last divorce, which was like 2001, 2002. And I had gone up. I mean, I bought a couple of airplanes. I was type rated in a Citation business jet. I flew a gentleman who owned a Citation too. He also owned a supermarket chain in the Southwest. I would fly along with his chief pilot. I'd fly his family to Acapulco, Cabo San Lucas. We would, I mean, as crew. I was a crew. I was like the second seat. I flew this jet, and I did it several times, and it was, you know, it wasn't a lot of money, but it gave me a chance to, you know, really fly as a commercial pilot. But again, it was in a business jet. It wasn't in a helicopter. But after my divorce, I was forced to give everything up. I had to sell everything. So many people have been down that road and can relate to the story. I had to readjust everything and start building back from the very bottom. You know, my finances, to my job prospect, everything. I had to start from zero back in 2002, and that's actually when I got when I got the ABC show, Are You Hot?
Right.
So bottom line is I had to quit flying for about 10 years. A, because I couldn't afford to rent or buy or rent or even keep my ratings current. You know,
right.
I couldn't afford really it, and I had these 3 new kids from my last wife that really needed a dad in their life, and I just sort of I just became a full-time dad and kind of pushed the whole aviation thing out of the picture for a good 10 years. And then the short story is that back in 2013, which is about 10 years after my divorce was finalized and all that, I talked to my present wife about going back to flight school because I just wasn't able to support myself as an actor. I wasn't working enough.
Right.
And I had to figure out another way to support my family. And, you know, sometimes you look in that toolbox and there's some tools in there that are a little bit rusty, but, you know, with a little polishing, they'll get the job done. So I got a loan. My sister loaned me the money I needed to go back to flight school and get a rating to instruct helicopters. So I got my flight instructor rating as a helicopter flight instructor. I chose helicopters because I had flown helicopters before for fun. And I thought, if I'm going to be stuck in a cabin with a student for hours upon hours upon hours, what would I rather be stuck in flying, a helicopter or a little airplane? And helicopters are a lot more fun to fly. They're a lot more challenging to fly, and maybe, you know, a little riskier. But I felt, you know, that would be a lot more fun for me to teach people how to fly helicopters. So that's the direction I went. And I started building my hours. And after 1,000 hours, it took me about 2.5 years to get 1,000 hours. I was very lucky. It takes some instructors 5 to 10 years to get 1,000 hours if they're working out in a smaller airport in a smaller city. But yeah, I got my time. I got my 1,000 hours, and then I started sending my resumes out as a professional helicopter pilot.
And from there, I booked a flight with you. I saw you talking about this new part of your life on Oprah's where are they now, I think it was. And I thought, holy cow, he's flying helicopters. So I booked a flight with you, maybe 18 months ago now or something. And I was blown away by the experience. First of all, it was my first time in a helicopter at all. And you made it so easy and fun. And I really got to witness how seriously you took it. You were radioing in signals and, locations and what was going on constantly throughout the short flight that we had. And you were really in control of that vehicle, and it was impressive and fun. And I even thought about it when I was in Kauai recently. I used to live on Kauai, and I was over there a couple weeks ago. And, flying a helicopter around Kauai is a big deal. And I thought to myself, I wonder if Lorenzo's ever flown a helicopter over Kauai. So I'm sure you would.
I've never flown in Hawaii, but the reason why I wanted to start to fly helicopters after I did all the airplane stuff was because of a flight that I took in Maui. I booked a tour with a helicopter company there, and this was in the mid-'80s, 10 years before I even started flying. But the memory of taking that flight was so ingrained in me that I knew one day I would try to learn how to fly a helicopter. I had no idea it would come this far, but
yeah.
And that ingrained it, and it happens so often with people I fly now that have never been in a helicopter. They'll take a flight, I'll show them the sights, and they'll come back a changed person, like I was,
Yeah. Well, I know I was firsthand. I can speak to my own experience, but I just love how you, through circumstance or whatever else, have repeatedly reinvented yourself, and sometimes in surprising ways, like that. And a lot of the people I work with are reinventing themselves after a successful career in one area, and you've done just that very successfully, while still maintaining the most important part of your life, which is your family. And before we move on to some of the other professional stuff, I just want to pivot on the fact that you have been through, you've had a string of divorces in your time. I think you're on your 5th marriage now. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the 5th and the last.
I sure hope it's the last, yeah. And of course, fathered 6 wonderful children. What you just shared previously, divorce is devastating. People don't realize it's not just that you sign a piece of paper and you walk away. It can really mess up everybody involved. And I wonder what some lessons are that you've learned over the years about how you manage to stay centered and grounded with so much going on and keep your family together.
Well, that's such a difficult question because I'm no expert. Obviously, at relationships or at divorce.
Surely you've learned a lot. I know you have, because I read the book.
I think that looking back, I shouldn't have been so impetuous and restless. I really found the answer to the question about how to cope. It really is within all of us. And it's the question is, am I okay being with myself? And if you have trouble answering that question, you really need to go and seek some professional help, because so many people like myself were uncomfortable being alone, and may have, certainly in my case, may have rushed into a relationship for fear of being alone.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest lesson I think I've learned through the course of this life, 58 years, is you have to really kind of be okay with you before you can be okay with anybody else.
Yeah, it's a lesson that was hard won over a long period of time, but I'm very glad you've mastered it at this point. At least I feel confident you have. We're always growing and learning, right? That's the one thing that's constant with no matter what our own individual paths have been. But
and change.
I take my hat off to you having gone through what you have and still being as grounded and centered as you are.
Well, thank you. It has been a difficult road, but there are many roads that are far more difficult than any road that I have ever walked.
True enough.
And we're faced with that reality every single day. We turn on the television set or listen to the radio and hear about people that have sacrificed their lives, to help make our lives the way they are. I'm talking about
Certainly
the folks
true.
that volunteer. It's an all-volunteer service now, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. It's all volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
So the folks that sign up for that are doing so of their own accord.
Yeah.
And I have such respect for the folks that do that. And anything that I would ever accomplish pales in the comparison of the dedication that these young men and women show every day out there around the world,
By putting themselves in harm's way on our behalf, and I just think too many people don't pause to think about that, even when we're supposed to, like on Memorial Day, which recently passed. It's not a day about barbecues, it's a day about remembering, Yeah,
it's not a day about people that have served, particularly, although I will kind of accept that from somebody who wants to say, thank you for serving on Memorial Day. They're really speaking to the folks that are still alive. It's not really what Memorial Day is, but any recognition on any level for anyone that has served, is serving, or will serve is welcome, as far as I'm concerned. Sometimes people get Veterans Day and Memorial Day mixed up, but as long as you're showing some kind of support, I definitely give them a pass on it.
Yeah, and thanks for clarifying. That's absolutely an important distinction. I don't disagree. So moving on, I do want to shift to some of your professional work a little bit. Last year you were a cast member on Celebrity Apprentice with Donald Trump, and surely you had one or two memorable moments with Donald that you may want to share. I'd like to hear about one or two of your own experiences with him personally.
It was such a tremendous experience doing that show because it forced me to be creative. Going into Celebrity Apprentice, you have to have tools, right? We're talking about tools. You've got to have tools, and some of the tools that you need in your box are number one, access to money, friends that have money, family that has money, your money, because money is really what drives that show. The money raised on that show goes to all the different celebrities' charities.
Right.
So it's number one. Number two is your ability to work well with others, and because others will be competing against you for most of the show in order for them to last, so you have to figure out a way to get along with everybody so that basically you don't get pushed aside and voted off the island, just to use
I watched,
a term.
by the way, I watched you on that whole series, and I watched a lot of the interaction.
So you got to get along. Number three, you have to have some ability to create something, whether it's create a script to write one of the commercials, whether it's to create a shot list for some kind of pitch that you're doing on the internet. Whatever it is, you have to create. You have to have some creative ability. And I think number four, finally, is you have to have not a lot of heart when it comes down to the final half dozen people, because if you can't throw somebody under the bus, you are not going to advance into the final round of The Apprentice. And that was the quality that basically did me in. I had the opportunity to throw a couple of people under the bus on a project that I was managing, and I wasn't able to do it. And I fell on the sword, I basically took myself out of the game. But
I watched that.
I was representing such a noble charity, and it just felt wrong. Everything about throwing somebody under the bus for me felt wrong.
Yeah.
And,
What was
you know,
your
I was,
again? Remind me, Lorenzo. What was your charity?
the charity that I played for is the Boot Campaign. And
Right.
they're a nonprofit based in Texas, started by 4 women who were so moved by the story of Marcus Luttrell. You know, that is, for most folks know who Marcus Luttrell is, the Navy SEAL that survived in that horrible Taliban incident that became the movie Lone Survivor.
Exactly. Yeah.
And these women were so moved by Marcus's story that they decided to start this charity, I think about 6 years ago. And I was made aware of the charity through a friend of mine, and was so motivated because the charity, what the Boot Campaign does, is it really serves the folks that are still here at home, the family members
Right.
that are left to cope with the returning soldiers and Marines, and that come back aren't necessarily the same folks that went away.
Right.
And the Boot Campaign will pay off mortgages. The Boot Campaign will replace a transmission in a truck that somebody at home still needs to drop the kids off at school in.
Yep.
You know, it's really I call it grassroots because it's a smaller organization, but I mean grassroots in the fact that they handle these individual cases hands-on. It's not a huge corporation. They don't have 500 people under them. They don't, send out flyers that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to print. They are just there for the families of these service people.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody has any interest in maybe doing a little bit of research or donating, they can go to www.bootcampaign.com.
Thank you. You anticipated that question. I wanted to be sure we give them some exposure and visibility for sure. And obviously very worthy organization. Lorenzo, I'm curious only because of, it's an obvious question, but any thoughts from your experience or insights into Trump's potential as the next U.S. president, having had that interaction with him, your own experience?
Well, I think we're seeing the potential, which is very high. He is potentially our next president, based on his popularity. The popular vote certainly wants him. And
did you have any indication of that when you were taping the show, that certain traits would extend to that level?
I had no idea. I like many other people was aware that he had kind of played at the idea of running for president years ago, but he just didn't do it. But that's all I knew. I didn't know that he would actually seriously run. Yeah. And it wasn't until he made that announcement that I realized that this guy is serious about it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I learned from doing the show about Mr. Trump. He's a very fair person, and he listens very carefully. He never forgets anything that anyone says. Mm-hmm. He has a mind that recollects things like a good attorney would recollect in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. He'll remember what somebody said weeks prior to bring up again in the present day if he's debating an issue in his boardroom, right, with the different contestants. Brilliant mind and very fair. Those were my takeaways. Those were my takeaways from participating in the show. Another takeaway for me, which speaks to the man that he is how well his kids have succeeded in their lives separately. Mm-hmm. I mean, granted, they work with their father, but they're all successful. They're successful people on their own merits, not because of what daddy gave them, but because of the people they've become because of their dad.
And does that extend to your hope for how your kids will be successful based on your interactions and imprint on them?
Of course, I absolutely hope.
Yeah.
That they can succeed in life and lead a life with a straight moral compass that makes decisions based on fairness and integrity, not on opportunity necessarily, and advancement in spite of another person,
right?
On their own merit, and that's what you hope for as a parent. And I think
sure.
We try, to instill those kinds of values when they're younger.
I'd like to believe that they're really going to appreciate at some point, if they don't already, what you did by everything we just discussed in terms of what you've done in your work as an actor, what you did to spend more time with them with the pilot piece. I really hope that over time that will play itself out in terms of your commitment.
Whether it does or not, doesn't affect the need to do it.
Yeah, I follow. Follow. You did what you had to do. You did what you had to do.
Not for recognition. Yeah, it was just about doing the right thing so that they had at least a fair shot at life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, going back to your work, I guess the last question I had about Celebrity Apprentice is just, did you create relationships with the others in the cast that you maintain or will maintain moving forward?
Yeah, sure. Vivica Fox and Ian Ziering and I were friends prior to the show. I knew Vivica. Vivica was actually did me a great favor and was in a little pilot that I shot several years ago about an LA street detective that used to be an actor that carries around a headshot with him just in case he meets a director that might give him a job. But he's a private investigator for the most, during the day.
Yeah.
And she did the pilot as a favor to me. We were neighbors for a while back in the late 90s, and she's a lovely, lovely person. So we got to be very, very good friends on the show, and we stuck up for each other all the time.
Yeah.
And then Ian and I were friends from. I'll be honest with you, we were friends because of charities that we had both shown up to support.
Sure.
And we did a lot of charities for the Ted Danson's Oceans campaign, and Jean-Paul DeJoria and Patron Tequila were sponsors of these great sports invitational events that we would end up going to support. Robert Kennedy's Waterkeepers Alliance is another charity that Ian and I supported through the sports invitational events. So we've known each other off and on for 15 years.
And he probably responsible for pulling you into the Sharknado film, I'm guessing, huh?
Yes, exactly.
Yep. Well, when you reflect, so that was a great experience with some of the ensemble that you already had some relationships with, and then
And I made a new friend with Tara Lomas. Tara and I became buddies on the show. So we don't really talk too much, but every once in a while we will reach out, text or whatever, and say, hey, bud, what's going on? What do you like for the NBA
there were
finals?
A lot of things that came to you out of that experience. I really do, from what you've shared and what I observed. And as you reflect on all the casts you've been a part of in times past, I mean, I have to share with you, honestly, Renegade was hands down my favorite of your series. I absolutely loved it. And I wonder, of the different casts you've been a part of, some of the people that you've worked with, who some of your favorites were, and why? People like Stephen J. Cannell and Branscombe Richmond and Jane Wyman.
Well, Jane was my surrogate grandmother. I mean, when I got Falcon Crest, I was 21 years old. I didn't know anything about anything. Especially, I was a new actor. I'd only been acting for 4 or 5 years, and here I am thrown into this mix of such talented actors. It was like graduate school for me.
Yeah.
And I learned from the best. I really learned from the best. From Jane, I learned what punctuality and preparation really means.
Mm-hmm.
She never came to the set unprepared. Always knew her lines. She always knew that we were going to get a few rehearsals and it was going to camera and the director was going to yell action and it's time to rock and roll. And she was always ready. I learned a lot on Falcon Crest. Really how to just stand there and tell the truth. I remember one day I was having difficulty with a line of dialogue. I was trying to make too much out of it. And Jane told the crew to take a break, and she took me aside. She goes, Lorenzo, you're trying to make too much out of the line. She said, I said, but I know, I just want this to sound so truthful. She goes, well, they're just words on a page. Say them and believe them.
Yeah.
Right? It's so simple. And little things like that just, I mean, she was such an amazing human being and such a lovely person.
You were very blessed to have that kind of guidance so young. Very blessed.
Very blessed. And then Renegade was the culmination of having been in the business for 15 years, having had some experience as an actor and on the set. And Renegade was sort of it was certainly the most responsibility I ever had on camera, because I was carrying a show, and thank God it was a show for Stephen Cannell, because he wrote characters that were so visceral and like Rockford Files and the A-Team and, all these great shows. I mean, imagine getting a chance to star in a series written by Stephen Cannell. I mean, I could barely contain my excitement, every day.
He was kind of the TV equivalent of Alfred Hitchcock. He even did his own appearances in some of the episodes, I recall.
Yeah, he did. He wrote himself in as my nemesis, Dutch Dixon, which I really liked because we shot the series in San Diego, so he rarely was able to come down. And the only reason I think one of the reasons why he wrote himself in the show is so he could come down and visit,
Yeah.
Because he was still very busy writing television while Renegade was on the air.
Yeah.
So it was fun playing against him. He was such a wonderful, warm person and a great dad, wonderful husband. He was just like a great fella. I was very, very lucky to have been able to confer with him on a professional level and also a personal one.
Yeah, and of course Branscombe Richmond. What a character,
And Branscombe and I are still friends to this day. We probably talk several times a month. As a matter of fact, he is responsible for inducting me into the Motorcycle Hall of Fame here in Las Vegas on October 1st. I mean, he's always been, a cheerleader for me, as I have been for him. Mm-hmm. And we're really buddies, just like we were on the show.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Now, obviously, both your parents were actors as well, and for all of our listeners, you must read Lorenzo's autobiography, Renegade at Heart. I loved it, and you go into a lot of detail about the influence of your parents, obviously, as you're growing up. But could you share just a little bit about how your father influenced your path and career?
Well, Dad, for me, was bigger than life, and I think it's because I probably didn't spend a lot of time with him. Yeah. So we tend to idolize figures that are in that parental place in our minds and in our hearts, especially when we're not with them a lot. We romanticize a lot of the times about people that have meaningful relationships in our lives if we don't see them a lot. Mm-hmm. You tend to remember only the positive and not so much the negative. And that was the case with my dad, because my parents divorced when I was 2 years old. My mother moved to New York and my dad stayed in Los Angeles. So the times that I saw my dad were few and far between. A couple of weeks in the summer And that was pretty much it until my mother moved back to California when I was in middle school. So I had 2 years with my dad picking me up at school twice a week, which really, really solidified and cemented a relationship with him on a real level, like going home with him, having his wife, Esther, make us dinner, and then him driving me back to my mother's after dinner.
And for listeners,
he lived in Bel Air.
Let's pause for a second. For listeners, Lorenzo, that's Fernando Lamas, your dad, and Esther Williams was your stepmom.
Right. Now, as a kid, you don't think of them as movie stars. They're just people that are parents, that are your parents, you know.
Right.
I wasn't really aware too much about, you know, my parents and their stature until I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And then, of course, you know, going out with my father, we would go run some errands. He'd go to the pharmacy or the drugstore or the auto shop, and everybody would just, like, go crazy. They'd want his autograph, you know, they'd want to talk to him. And my dad would engage everybody, you know. And the same thing with my mom. We would go to dinner at nice restaurants, and all of a sudden we had the best table. And, you know, it's like the waiters were swarming, and it's like, what's going on? Why do they care so much?
Yeah.
You know?
And again, you do go into a lot of that in the book. I really loved the book. I know you put your heart and soul into it. It really shows. But I wonder what some of the key takeaways or morals of the story that you found in doing the book as you reflected on your life and career, and what you hope readers will get from it.
Well, when you make a mistake, admit it and move on, I guess is a takeaway. I tend to think of myself as a hopeless romantic, so I take full responsibility for all the horrible decisions I've made romantically. You know, you just have to, brush yourself off, you know, and get back at it, and try not to be derailed by failure, because failure is not the end of what you're trying to do. It's the beginning of doing it right.
That's right.
And so much of failure has been in my life, both on a personal level, on a professional level, even in my aviation activities. You know, failure is part of the process of learning.
Mm-hmm.
And don't quit. You know, just if you want to do something, do it, no matter how long it takes to get it done. Just do it.
Right.
But that's a generalization. You know, everybody kind of knows that because we've all heard of it. You know, but I think it's vital. A lot of people quit doing things because A, they're tired of failing at trying, or B, they really don't think they can. And that's a mindset, you know.
And by the way, that's why it's important to have someone around you, a coach, an advisor, somebody in your life who will help bolster you and remind yourself of your gifts and your talents and keep you on the path.
Yeah, if you're lucky, or just go to church, you know, because it's really all there in the Word of the Lord in the Bible. It's all there. We have every single tool that we need in life to succeed.
Yeah.
If we just stay focused and keep trying at it. It's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
And people that expect things to happen overnight, they're not living in a real world.
Well, and self-discipline and perseverance are key facets there. That leads me to ask you about your black. I know you have black belts in both Taekwondo and Karate. So besides being able to do your own stunts, how have those disciplines of you becoming a master in those areas influenced your perspective on what we just discussed, your life and your success through perseverance?
It is that stick-to-itiveness, because God knows it took me forever to get my first black belt, like 10 years or something, you know.
Yeah.
And it was just about finishing something. I wanted to finish it. I really wanted to get it done.
Mm-hmm. You
didn't
want to quit.
It was a huge accomplishment. I mean, when I got my black belt from Sensei Al Thomas back in 1989, I had done Falcon Crest, I'd done movies, I had fathered children, I mean, I'd done a lot for my age, but really very little compared to the feeling of accomplishment when I was handed that black belt. It was just something that will always stand out in my mind. I got a similar feeling of accomplishment recently when I was hired by a big helicopter operator out here to become a tour pilot.
And when you say out here, we're talking your recent reload to Vegas.
Yeah. I've moved to Las Vegas in December, potentially to work for a helicopter company out here running tours to the Grand Canyon. And when I got picked up to do that, it was a feeling like getting a black belt because it was something that I had worked very, very hard for probably five years.
Wow.
Focused on building the hours that I needed, getting the experience that I needed, getting the ratings that I needed, washing helicopters, mopping hangar floors, answering phones, booking tours, doing all that work for basically no money, just to build the hours that I needed to get hired for a real full-time job.
Wow. Wow. I tell you, between the discipline of doing all of that on the pilot side and the discipline in the black belts and everything else, I mean, you really you're a living embodiment of the importance of self-discipline and perseverance and not quitting.
Thanks. But back at you, Kelly. You're a creation of your own design as well.
True. It's
we all
true.
Are.
And that's just it. But I think of everything we've discussed in this time together, what's really stuck with me is the importance to you and what should be to all of us of not being afraid of failure and putting in the effort it takes to achieve the results no matter how long it takes, not quitting and not giving up on ourselves.
I think so.
So I really respect you on so many levels, and I want to thank you again. I know your time is very precious for making the time to do this with me. I really enjoyed it. I hope you have too.
I did too. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Lorenzo, before we wrap up, is there somewhere our listeners could go, some central place for you that they could learn more about what you're up to? Is it just LorenzoLamas.com, or where would they go?
On Twitter, it's at Lorenzo Lamas. And my Instagram is Lorenzo_Lamas, at Lorenzo_Lamas. Yeah.
So you don't have a website. It's just all social media.
I don't have a website. Got
it. Fair enough. Well, thanks again. We'll be in touch again soon. And I want to thank our show producer, as I do each week, Jessica Mastors, for the wonderful job she does. Really appreciate your time again, Lorenzo, and we'll say goodnight to the audience. Thanks again, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kelly. Good night, everyone.
Pleasure, Lorenzo. Bye for now.